program on West African history. We are going to be looking at today the fall of Mali Empire. But before we talk about that, I've always told you that the West African empires were great prior to even the coming of Europeans. You've heard of empires such as Empire, who when I was taking you that aspect of West African history, you were able to know that the Ghana Empire was a great empire, rich, wealthy, and all that. But like all empires, Ghana Empire fell. We are going to Mali Empire, which I've been able to teach you about Sundiata, Mansa Musa. Also, this empire um, fell. It got to a time, of course, it fell. But before we talk about that fall, there's always this question they normally ask students in West African history, especially those which it has to do with periods before 1500, comparing Sundiata and Mansa Musa, who is greater? And I would like to ask you students, for me, who do you? Sundiata is the first and the founder of the Mali Empire. He was a chief, and he was seen to by some to be crippled in some chronicles, and as a cripple, he was believed to have been able to lead his army, and they were able to overrun Sumanguru and Co. And in that manner, the Malinke people, the Mali Empire rose. And since then, Mali grew and grew. But like all empires, as I said, there's always a time empires will fall. But when we talk about a person such as Sundiata, we are talking about 1234. Sundiata reigned in 1234 and also was able to rule up to 1255 AD. You could see that Sundiata was able to rule from 1234 AD to 1255 AD. Also, if we talk about Mansa Musa ruled from 1207 AD to 1339 AD. So it's clear they did not rule in the same period. But if you look at it in those places, Sundiata ruled in the 12th century, Mansa Musa ruled in the 14th century. Sundiata ruled in the 12th century, Mansa Musa ruled in the 14th century. Sundiata, 1234 AD to 1255 AD, Mansa Musa, 1307 AD to 1339 AD. So it's clear that these two rulers ruled at different periods. But for Sundiata was the forerunner. He was the one that is to be that you would attribute that he was able to establish the empire called Mali through his doggedness as a leader. He was able to establish that empire, that old empire called Mali. And since from then on, Mali ruled. Mali became an established empire, even known to Europeans. That I've been able to explain in our past lectures. Mali reigned as an empire, even known to the Europeans, that Mali, through a cartographer, was put on the map. But if you look at Sundiata, when he started the leadership of Mali, the question people had always asked, is who is even greater between Sundiata and Mansa Musa? For some, Sundiata is considered a greater leader. For some, Mansa Musa is considered a greater leader. But for Sundiata, he is the forerunner, just like I explained to you. He started what we all know as the Mali Empire. He began the conquering. He began what made the Malinke people lift to a level that the world still remembers them till today. The world still remembers them today. So you could see that, in fact, Sundiata had become somebody who had put a footprint in the history of Mali. He had been able to put a footprint in the history of Mali. But Mansa Musa started, he ruled in the 14th century, but he also made his mark. Mansa Musa was able to make his mark in his own time, and everyone, of course, know that period when he, as a religious bigot, he was able to travel to Mecca and stayed in Egypt, and his influence and his gold that he took was so enormous that it made the economy in Egypt, as it concerned gold, and even in Mecca, to be one that gold became close to be useless. That was the kind of mission which Mansa Musa did at that period. And Mansa Musa also was an expansionist. Sundiata was an expansionist. Both led their armies into victory upon victory. So sometimes people look at this and say, oh, Mansa Musa is greater, Sundiata is greater. But I must let you know that in this aspect, Mansa Musa did so better than even Sundiata. But I've explained to you that Sundiata is a forerunner when it comes to the history of Mali. Administratively, Mansa Musa was able to bring in Muslim clerics who helped him to administer Mali, and they are helping him to administer Mali. Mali became one that today, during that period, was one that had made an imprint upon the Malian society. But I want us to get this right. When we are talking about Mali here, we're not talking about Mali as a nation now. We're talking about the old Mali Empire, where in that period it encompasses places such as where we know as the Western Sudan. And you could see that Mali indeed was one that is bigger than the one state that we feel the present Mali is. It's bigger than one state in which we feel that the present Mali is. So there was so many things. People have looked at them from the religious angle. Some would rate Sundiata higher when it comes to the religious angle. Why? Would rate Mansa Musa higher when it comes to religious angle, because, of course, most of the writers in those periods were Muslim clerics. So if you are more of a Muslim, you are rated higher. So they rate him higher. Administrative-wise, Mansa Musa is seen as somebody, because he was able to adopt Islamic system of governance, also is given a higher aspect in that aspect. But if you won't take anything out for Sundiata, because Sundiata, he started with nothing. Malinke Empire was nothing, and he was able to rule the place and take charge of that place. He was able to rule that place and take charge. So you could see that all this were what Sundiata, Mansa Musa was able to do. But we are not going all to that. We will be going to, why did this great empire fall? I tried giving you some form of similarities and comparison, between Mansa Musa and Sudiata. But why did this empire fall? After Mansa Musa died, left the place, left the throne, a lot of succession disputes, attack from the Mosses, attack from the Tuaregs, influenced whatever may have led to the collapse of the Mali Empire. Influence whatever may have led to the collapse of the Mali Empire. I would try and explain some things to you. During the latter half of the 14th century, the decline of the empire set in. The decline of that empire set in. During the latter part of the 14th century, the decline of that empire set in. Then, of course, this led to what is known as the eventual collapse of the empire. This led to what is known as the eventual collapse of the empire. The history of the kings of Mali, or the leaders of Mali, the history of the leaders of Mali, from the end of the reign of Mansa Suleiman to the end of the 14th century, was nothing but a record of succession disputes, assassinations, insurrections, people who are pushing, even called some of these things coup d'etat, who wanted to be leader at all costs. And as a result, and once you don't get the leadership right in any you call it nation, empire, of course, this would dovetail and have an effect upon other aspects of the economy, politics, social, and other aspects. And that could be one major reason why Mali fell. That could be one major reason why Mali. Immediately after Suleiman had died, Mansa Suleiman, who was one of their leaders, it's not Mansa Musa, get it very clearly. Once he died, succession disputes, civil wars, insurrections, assassinations, unstable government. And this unstable government created what led to the fall of the Mali Empire. This unstable government created what could be considered as the fall of Mali Empire. Mansa Suleiman, I'm talking of now, was succeeded by his son Kassa. The Kassa we are talking of is Qasa. Get that right. Was succeeded by his son Kassa. But the son who succeeded Suleiman was one that could not hold the nation in a strong grip. And I thought there were crises here and there. There's a crisis between one of the aspirants or pushers to become leader, Marijata, who organized a rebellion against him. This rebellion led to what is known as civil war. And Kassa, who was the king, was killed. This rebellion led to what is known as a civil war. And Kassa, he was killed, who led immediately after Suleiman had died. So what it should be. This affair what could be considered as the empire becoming what it should be. With Marijata's rebellion, this created maybe in him some form of wickedness, extravagance, and before according to Ibn Khaldun, he nearly pulled down the rule of Marijata, nearly pulled down the political structure even in Mali at this period. A lot of governors were left undone because he was considered to be wicked to the people. He was considered to be corrupt. He was considered to be even extravagant in his spending. That was what Ibn Khaldun said when in 1373 as regards this person. This person, Marijata, died with sleeping sickness. So you should take note of that. He died with sleeping sickness, which means at that period too, there used to be this disease. The disease still remains today. Sleeping sickness affected him, and he died, and was succeeded by his son. This man, Marijata, named his son Mansa Musa II. But take note, this son who succeeded him ruled between 1373 to 1387. 1373 to 1387. Mansa Musa II now was more interested in the good of the empire. But even in his trying to be good, he was also seen to be was interested in the good of the empire, and even in trying to be good, he was considered or seen to be a weak leader. And he wasn't able to handle the nation with a strong grip, and as such, created a posture that also was part of the reason why that empire collapsed. Created a posture that also created a situation where that empire, the Mali Empire, collapsed. Remember, this Mali Empire was an empire that had made a foothold in the whole of West Africa at that period. But because of what was happening politically, this situation was not in one way or the other too good for the empire, and it led to a decrease in the development or growth of the empire. Instead of the empire now growing, leadership issues created it that they began to fall. And as the empire began to fall, of course, there will be a lot of people who will be with their prowling eyes trying to take over from what could be the spoils of the empire. From what could be the spoils of the empire. Though Mansa Musa II had a good intention, he was a very weak ruler, and power was seized by one of his ministers, who is said to have placed him under house arrest. So you could see what simply happened. He was so weak that he was arrested and kept under what is known as house arrest, which means pushed into a house and was not allowed to leave the house. In short, within a period of 30 years, from 1360 to 1390, as many as 7 rulers had ruled on the throne. So, which means within that period of 30 years, 1360 to 1390, as short as you would see those periods, Mali Empire had 7 people who had come up to the throne. As many as 7 rulers who had sat on the throne. 3 of whom were killed. Take note, 3 of whom of those rulers were killed after a reign of a year or less each. Some even just ruled for a year, some even less than a year. Clear evidence of instability, anarchy, and weaknesses at the center. So the center was not holding at all. Take note, in just 30 years, they had 7 rulers. A lot of, which means in some years, in just some, before 1 year is exhausted, they've changed their leaders. And all these have an impact on any structure, any nation, any empire. Why do we need to even study such topics? Is for us to learn the mistakes from the past. When leadership is not perfectly in order, it creates a vacuum that will lead to the fall of that structure, empire, nation, or country. As one would expect, some of the vassal states, such as the Sunike states, the Sunike, you get to know them, the Songhai Empire later on, the Sunike states of Dara, Daifunu, and Meme, the Sunike states of Gao, the Wolof, the Toro states, use the weakness in Mali. These places were under the control. You remember when Mali was rising, I told you that all these places were places that were conquered by the empire. But these same places now were the one rearing his head, aspiring to conquer or take over what could be the remnants of Mali. The Todo states, the people from Meme, which are Sunikis, the Wolof, all these groups of persons, the Susus, all the Mosses, all these groups, the Tuaregs, all these groups of persons were now threatening to take an advantage of that state. We are threatening to take an advantage of the state. They wanted to take advantage of the weak states or weak power of Mali, or break away completely. Just like you remember in the old Ghana Empire, what the Almoravids did to defeat Ghana in 1076, you should remember that. And this is what is simply happening now. This is what is simply happening now. Clearly then, just as the Almoravids defeated Ghana in 1076, signaled the disintegration of Ghana. Remember, the Almoravids defeated Ghana, and from then on, the Sumanguru, then later the Malikes took over, and a new empire rose, which was the Mali Empire. The same thing simply is happening when it comes to the Mali Empire now. The same thing simply is happening when it comes to. So the struggle for power among the members of disintegration of Ghana at that period can be compared to what is even happening in Mali. The struggle for power among members, people who are of the royal family, created that vacuum, the vacuum that would later lead to the collapse of the Mali Empire. Created that vacuum, the vacuum that would later lead to the collapse of the Mali Empire. And this struggle for power created a disintegration of Mali. This struggle, this pursuit for power created a disintegration of Mali. And Mali, of course, began to fall drastically. Had Mali been left alone, perhaps yet another Sundiata or Mansa or Suleiman would have emerged. But when these aspiring states who wanted some form of independence, the Mossis, the Tuareg, the Memes, the Diafunus, the Diaras, the Sunikis, the Meme, Diafunu, Diara, the Sunikis were interested in getting independence, interested in taking the spoils in Mali. If they have left Mali alone, maybe they would have sorted themselves out, and a new person who is strong in the grip of leadership may have taken over. But that did not happen. That did not happen. These states, other states, were more interested in taking completely the spoils from Mali. And this created the collapse of Mali. Mali was now attacked from different territories by different powers. Mali was attacked from different territories by different powers. During the first half of the 15th century, it was attacked from the north. During the first half of the 15th century, it was attacked from the north. it was attacked from the north. During the first hour of the 15th century, it was attacked from the north. And who was the one attacking Mali from the north? Who were the ones attacking Mali from the north? A group of people called the Tuaregs. And from the south, by a group of people called the Morsi. And these attacks here and there, of course, no nation will be able to withstand attack here, attack there. Of course, that nation is writing a letter to collapse. And that is what simply happened in Mali. By 1433, a place called Arawan and Timbuktu and other parts of the Sahel had been captured by the Tuaregs. So you could see Timbuktu, a very important place, Arawan, and other parts of this Sahel have been captured by the Tuaregs, which means Tuaregs was able to take some spoils from Mali, led by his famous the Tuareg leader who led this was a famous man called Akilu Akamawa. Akilu Akamawa. Akilu Akamawa. Akamawa is Akamawal. So Akilu Akamawa. He was the one who was able to, he was the one who led the Tuaregs to take over the Mali Empire. At the same time, the Morsi raided the southeastern districts of Mali. So in the southeast area of Mali, a group of people called the Morsi raided it, attacked it, and also took their spoils from Mali. So you could see they didn't just raid those places. They also raided the Middle Niger and Lake Dembo area in 1413. In 1477, this group of people attacked Masina and from there besieged Walata in 1480. And remember, Walata is a very popular mineral resource area. All these places were attacked, where they were defeated in 1483 and driven back by their countryman or a Songhai or Sunike person called Sunni Ali. So these defeats here and there created a major vacuum. These defeats here and there created a major vacuum, which created that aspect where Mali itself collapsed. So by the middle of the 15th century, which is a little past ours, by the middle of the 15th century, Mali had lost virtually all its northern and Sahelian vassal states. And with the loss of this control, of course, you know, in those days, I want to explain this to you. If you lose the Sahelian areas, one major thing which you will lose is the trade route, the Trans-Sahara trade routes, which I've taught you before, the Trans-Sahara trade routes. The Trans-Sahara trade routes, which you would have lost, that means that a major level of economic growth or development would be lost in whatever empire. What does that you lose the Trans-Saharan trade routes? That means you can't tax caravans passing through it. Your goods would have to depend on other areas or other people who would now tax you, which means making your state a weaker state to pass through that route to North Africa. So at that period we were talking about, today we talk about the sea routes, we talk about the Atlantic Ocean. That's why for those of you who are Nigerians, we would see places like Lagos as important. For those of you who are maybe from Ghana or those areas, you see places like Takorodi, a very important place, because every goods, all nations depend on import and exports, and you must find a route for your import and export. In those days, the route for the import and exports goes through where we call the Sahara Desert. That's why we say it is a trans-Sahara trade route. And through the trans-Sahara trade route, you could connect places like Libya, you could connect places like Algeria, you could connect places like Morocco, you could connect places like Egypt. So in that route, you are able to take your goods. You remember the Mansa Musa journey, how he was able to get to Egypt, from Egypt, moving outside the continent of Africa to Asia. And that same, by the conquering of the Tuaregs and the Moses and Mali lost, which is a sizable number of its economy was lost. But the long and short of this, the final blow was however delivered by a group of people called the Songhai Empire. And the Songhai Empire. And maybe if I want to break it down for you, the Sunnis, who now overran what was remaining of Mali, and a new empire emerged. But we will not be talking about the Songhai Empire. Our periods end in 1500, and you could see that the Mali Empire a little bit had pushed outside the 1500 scope. But I want to let us all know that the Mali Empire, as I've always explained to you, is an important empire, great, and just like an important empire, great, and just like I tell you, even before the Europeans came to Africa, so we could see that the Malians had made his imprint, or footprint upon the West African region, and did his part before 1500. The study of such empires, remember these empires when they were at their peak, were empires that were not helped by cell phones, cars, or whatever you call it today. At that period was a period where the economies depended on the mineral resources of the place, proper leadership of the place, the trans-Sahara trade routes, and all this helped most of the empires to grow. And Africans played their roles also in this aspect. And when I'm talking of Africans here now, I'm talking of West Africans. And an important empire that rose from as an empire. It did so well as an empire that it made its mark, even when we are talking of an empire, of empires today. It made its mark, and it's in no way inferior to any other empire of the